The fluorescent lights of the Meridian financial offices had never felt more oppressive than they did that Tuesday morning when I walked through those glass doors with my 3-month-old daughter strapped to my chest. The receptionist's jaw dropped. The security guard fumbled with his coffee. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this day would change everything. Not just for me, but for every working mother who'd ever been told to choose between her career and her child. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Rebecca Chen, and 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was a senior marketing analyst at Meridian Financial, one of Denver's most prestigious investment firms. I had a corner office on the 23rd floor, a salary that let me afford my downtown loft, and a boss who seemed to respect my work. I was 32, ambitious, and had just married my college sweetheart, David, the previous spring. When I found out I was pregnant in January, I felt that familiar surge of excitement mixed with terror that I imagine most women experience. David and I had been trying for a baby for over a year, and when those 2 pink lines appeared on the test, I called him immediately. He was in court. He's a public defender, but he stepped out to take my call, and I could hear the smile in his voice when I told him. The first person I told at work was my colleague, Sarah Martinez, who had become one of my closest friends since I started at Meridian 3 years earlier. Sarah had gone through her own pregnancy journey 2 years prior, and I trusted her judgment completely. "Rebecca, that's incredible news," she said, pulling me into her cubicle so we could talk privately. "Have you thought about when you'll tell Harrison?" Harrison Webb was our department head, a man in his late 50s who had built his career in the old-school world of finance. He was known for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue, but he'd always treated me fairly. At least, I thought he had. I decided to wait until I was through my first trimester before making any announcements. Those early weeks were challenging. The morning sickness hit me harder than I'd expected, and there were days when I could barely keep my breakfast down, but I pushed through, determined not to let pregnancy affect my performance. In March, when I was finally ready to share the news, I scheduled a meeting with Harrison. I remember the date exactly, March 15th. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I'd spent the entire morning rehearsing what I would say. Harrison's office was exactly what you'd expect from a senior executive at a financial firm: mahogany desk, leather chairs, and walls lined with awards and certificates. When I knocked on his door, he was reviewing quarterly reports, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Rebecca, come in. What can I do for you?" I sat down across from his desk, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. "Harrison, I wanted to share some personal news with you. I'm pregnant. The baby is due in September." For a moment his expression didn't change. Then he set down his papers and looked at me over his glasses. "Well, congratulations," he said, though his tone was notably flat. "I assume you'll be taking maternity leave?" "Yes, I was hoping we could discuss the details. I know the company policy provides for 12 weeks of unpaid leave under FMLA, and I'd like to use my accumulated vacation time to cover part of that period." Harrison leaned back in his chair, a gesture I'd seen him make countless times during difficult negotiations with clients. "Rebecca, I'm going to be honest with you. The timing isn't ideal. We're in the middle of the Caldwell acquisition, and you're the lead analyst on that project. It's worth $47 million to this firm." I had anticipated this concern. "I understand the timing is challenging, but the baby isn't due until mid-September. The Caldwell deal should be finalized by July, according to our current timeline." "Should be," he repeated. "But these deals have a way of dragging on. What if it doesn't close until October? What if there are complications? I need someone I can count on to see this through." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Harrison, I've never missed a deadline or failed to deliver on a project. I'm committed to ensuring a smooth transition for any ongoing work." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. "Rebecca, let me ask you something. How committed are you to your career here? Really committed?" The question caught me off guard. "Completely committed. Having a baby doesn't change my dedication to my work." He turned back to face me. "Doesn't it? Because in my experience, once women have children, their priorities shift. Suddenly they're leaving early for daycare pickup, taking days off for doctor appointments, requesting flexible schedules. The work suffers." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "That's quite an assumption to make, Harrison. I don't think it's fair to judge my future performance based on stereotypes." "It's not a stereotype, Rebecca. It's a pattern I've observed over 25 years in this business." He returned to his desk and sat down. "Look, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but I have a responsibility to this company and to our clients. The Caldwell acquisition is critical to our growth strategy for the next fiscal year. And I have a responsibility to my family," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "A legal right, actually, to take maternity leave." Harrison's expression hardened. "Legal rights are one thing, career advancement is another. You need to think carefully about what's more important to you right now." I left that meeting feeling shaken. It wasn't the congratulatory conversation I'd hoped for, but I told myself that Harrison was just concerned about the project. Once he saw that I could manage both my responsibilities and my pregnancy, things would improve. Over the next few months, I worked harder than I ever had. I came in early, stayed late, and made sure every aspect of the Caldwell acquisition was documented and organized. I created detailed transition plans for each phase of the project, trained junior associates on the more complex elements, and even recorded video tutorials for procedures that might come up in my absence. Sarah noticed the extra hours I was putting in. "Rebecca, you don't have to prove anything to anyone," she told me one evening as we were both finally leaving the office after 9 o'clock. "You're already one of the top performers in the department." "I know," I said, rubbing my lower back, which had been aching more frequently as my pregnancy progressed. "But I want to make sure there are no questions about my commitment." The Caldwell deal did indeed close in July, 2 months ahead of schedule, and with terms even more favorable than we'd initially projected. I felt vindicated. I had proven that I could deliver exceptional results while pregnant, and I'd set up comprehensive systems to ensure continuity during my leave. In early August, with my due date just 6 weeks away, I scheduled another meeting with Harrison to finalize my maternity leave plans. This time I came prepared with written documentation of everything I'd accomplished and detailed handover notes for my temporary replacement. "Harrison, I wanted to review the transition plan for my maternity leave," I began, sliding a folder across his desk. "Everything is documented here: project timelines, client contact information, status reports, and step-by-step procedures for ongoing tasks." He glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about this situation and I'm afraid I can't approve your leave request." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "The company is in a critical growth phase. We've just signed 3 new major clients as a result of the Caldwell success, and frankly, we need all hands on deck. I can't afford to lose my senior marketing analyst for 3 months." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "Harrison, this isn't a request. It's a legal entitlement under the Family and Medical Leave Act. The company has more than 50 employees. I've been here for 3 years, and I've worked the required hours. You can't deny me FMLA leave." "I can't deny you unpaid leave," he corrected. "But I can restructure your position while you're gone. When you come back, there might not be a senior analyst role available. You might be looking at a junior position, possibly part-time, with a corresponding salary adjustment." My hands clenched in my lap. "Are you threatening my job?" "I'm explaining the business reality. We're a competitive industry, Rebecca. We need people who can commit fully to their roles. If you're not available when we need you, we have to make other arrangements." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "This is discrimination, Harrison, pure and simple." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Rebecca, I think you're being emotional. That's understandable in your condition. But let's think practically. Do you really want to come back to work 3 months after having a baby? Wouldn't it be better to focus on being a mother? Maybe this is the universe telling you to reassess your priorities." That's when something inside me snapped. I had worked 60-hour weeks. I had delivered every project on time and under budget. I had trained replacements, documented processes, and exceeded every metric in my performance reviews. And now I was being told that wanting to bond with my newborn child made me uncommitted to my career. "I know," I said, rubbing my lower back, which had been aching more frequently as my pregnancy progressed. "But I want to make sure there are no questions about my commitment." The Caldwell deal did indeed close in July, 2 months ahead of schedule, and with terms even more favorable than we'd initially projected. I felt vindicated. I had proven that I could deliver exceptional results while pregnant, and I'd set up comprehensive systems to ensure continuity during my leave. In early August, with my due date just 6 weeks away, I scheduled another meeting with Harrison to finalize my maternity leave plans. This time I came prepared with written documentation of everything I'd accomplished and detailed handover notes for my temporary replacement. "Harrison, I wanted to review the transition plan for my maternity leave," I began, sliding a folder across his desk. "Everything is documented here: project timelines, client contact information, status reports, and step-by-step procedures for ongoing tasks." He glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about this situation, and I'm afraid I can't approve your leave request." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "The company is in a critical growth phase. We've just signed 3 new major clients as a result of the Caldwell success, and frankly, we need all hands on deck. I can't afford to lose my senior marketing analyst for 3 months." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "Harrison, this isn't a request. It's a legal entitlement under the Family and Medical Leave Act. The company has more than 50 employees, I've been here for 3 years, and I've worked the required hours. You can't deny me FMLA leave." "I can't deny you unpaid leave," he corrected, "but I can restructure your position while you're gone. When you come back, there might not be a senior analyst role available. You might be looking at a junior position, possibly part-time, with a corresponding salary adjustment." My hands clenched in my lap. "Are you threatening my job?" "I'm explaining the business reality. We're a competitive industry, Rebecca. We need people who can commit fully to their roles. If you're not available when we need you, we have to make other arrangements." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "This is discrimination, Harrison. Pure and simple." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Rebecca, I think you're being emotional. That's understandable in your condition. But let's think practically. Do you really want to come back to work 3 months after having a baby? Wouldn't it be better to focus on being a mother? Maybe this is the universe telling you to reassess your priorities." "I'll be taking my legally entitled maternity leave," I said, standing up. "And when I return, I expect my position to be waiting for me." Harrison shrugged. "Do what you think is best, Rebecca. But I can't make any guarantees about what the department will look like in 3 months." I walked out of his office and straight to the restroom, where I finally allowed myself to cry. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman who had ever been made to feel like she had to choose between her career and her family. It was about a system that claimed to support working mothers while systematically undermining them at every turn. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My daughter Emma was born on September 12th, after 18 hours of labor that left me exhausted but euphoric. David cried when he held her for the first time, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family. The first few weeks at home were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. Emma was a good baby, but like all newborns, she demanded constant attention. I found myself thinking about work less and less, and when I did think about it, it was with a growing sense of dread about my eventual return. Sarah visited me at home when Emma was about 6 weeks old, bringing coffee and pastries from our favorite cafe downtown. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling into my living room chair while I nursed Emma on the couch. "I'm good," I said, though I knew I looked as tired as I felt. "Scared about going back to work, though. Harrison made it pretty clear that my job might not be there when I return." Sarah's expression darkened. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. They hired someone to replace you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, replace me? They brought in Marcus Thompson from our Seattle office. He's been given your desk, your projects, and your title. Harrison introduced him as the new senior marketing analyst. I felt the room spinning slightly. But I'm still technically employed. I'm on leave. I know, it doesn't make sense legally, but that's what's happening. And Rebecca, she paused, looking uncomfortable. Marcus is already talking about the changes he wants to make to your systems. He's acting like he's permanent. That night, after David came home from work, I told him what Sarah had shared. He was furious. They can't do this, he said, pacing around our small living room while Emma slept in her bouncer. This is textbook retaliation. We should call an employment lawyer. With what money? I asked. We're already struggling with just your salary, and lawyers are expensive. Besides, even if we win eventually, what kind of workplace am I going back to? Harrison will make my life miserable. David sat down next to me on the couch. So what do you want to do? I looked down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding her young life. I want to go back to work. I want to do my job. And I want them to follow the law. 2 weeks before my leave was scheduled to end, I called Harrison's office to discuss my return. Harrison Webb's office. His assistant, Janet, answered. Hi, Janet, it's Rebecca Chen. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Harrison to discuss my return from maternity leave. There was a pause. Oh, Rebecca, let me check his calendar and get back to you. She never called back. I tried again the next day and the day after that. Finally, I called the main HR line and spoke to Patricia Williams, the HR director. Patricia, I'm scheduled to return from maternity leave next Monday, and I need to confirm the details of my transition back. Rebecca, let me look into this and call you back, Patricia said, her tone carefully neutral. When she called back 2 hours later, her message was devastating. Rebecca, I've spoken with Harrison, and there seems to be some confusion about your employment status. He's indicating that you resigned your position before taking leave. I absolutely did not resign, I said, my voice rising. I have documentation of our meetings. I have emails. I never resigned. I understand this is frustrating. Could you come in tomorrow to meet with Harrison and me to sort this out? I agreed, but I had a sinking feeling about how that meeting would go. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, printing out every email, every meeting note, every document that proved I had followed proper procedures for my maternity leave. The meeting the next day was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd expected. Harrison sat across from Patricia and me in the small HR conference room, looking completely relaxed while I felt like I was fighting for my professional life. Rebecca, Harrison began, I think there's been a misunderstanding. In our last conversation, I got the impression that you were planning to resign to focus on motherhood. That's absolutely not what happened, I replied, pulling out my documentation. I told you I was taking my legally entitled maternity leave. I never mentioned resigning. Patricia looked between us. Do we have any documentation of Rebecca's resignation? Harrison shifted slightly in his chair. It was a verbal conversation. But given her situation, I thought it was clear that she was choosing to prioritize her family. My situation? I repeated. You mean having a baby? That's exactly why the Family and Medical Leave Act exists, to protect employees from this kind of assumption. The meeting went in circles for an hour. Harrison insisted I had resigned, though he couldn't produce any documentation. I insisted I had simply taken approved leave, and I had plenty of documentation to support that. Patricia seemed caught in the middle, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but unwilling to directly contradict a department head. Finally, Patricia suggested a compromise. What if we consider this a miscommunication and reinstate Rebecca to an available position? What kind of position? I asked. Harrison spoke up. We have an opening for a junior analyst. Part-time, 25 hours a week. The salary would be about 60% of what you were making before. I felt like I'd been slapped. You want me to take a demotion and a pay cut because I had a baby? I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone, Harrison said. The senior analyst position has been filled. This is what's available. I looked at Patricia, hoping for some support, but her expression remained carefully neutral. It was clear that she wasn't going to challenge Harrison's version of events. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "Of course," Patricia replied. "Take a few days." I left that meeting feeling completely defeated. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built over 3 years at Meridian Financial, was being stripped away because I had dared to have a child. That weekend, David and I talked through our options. We could take the part-time position and hope to rebuild from there, but the reduced salary would barely cover our basic expenses. We could fight legally, but that would take months or years and cost money we didn't have. Or I could look for a new job, but explaining why I left my previous position would be complicated. "What if we don't accept their terms?" David asked on Sunday morning as we sat at the breakfast table. Emma was in her high chair, happily smearing banana across her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you just show up for work on Monday? Show up for your regular job, at your regular desk, and make them explain to everyone why you can't work there." The idea was terrifying and appealing at the same time. "David, they've already replaced me. Marcus Thompson is sitting at my desk. So sit somewhere else. Use a conference room. Make them physically escort you out if they want to get rid of you." I looked at Emma, who was now clapping her banana-covered hands together with delight. "I can't just leave her with a babysitter for a full day. We haven't arranged childcare yet because we thought I'd have more time to figure it out." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "So bring her with you." Monday morning arrived faster than I wanted it to. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror at 6:30, trying to figure out how to look professional while accommodating a baby carrier. Emma gurgled contentedly as I adjusted the straps, her tiny fingers grasping at the fabric of my blazer. David had already left for court, but not before giving me a pep talk and a thermos of coffee strong enough to fuel a small aircraft. "Remember," he had said, kissing both Emma and me goodbye, "you belong there. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." The 40-minute drive downtown gave me time to rehearse what I would say, though every scenario I imagined seemed to end with security escorting me out. Emma slept most of the way, occasionally making those soft baby sounds that reminded me why I was doing this in the first place. Parking in the Meridian Financial garage felt surreal. I had done this routine hundreds of times before, but never with a 3-month-old strapped to my chest. The security guard, Mike, who had always greeted me with a friendly nod, did a double take as I approached the elevator bank. "Morning, Mike," I said, trying to sound casual. Morning, Rebecca," he replied, his eyes fixed on Emma. "Congratulations on the baby. She's beautiful." "Thank you. I'm heading up to the office." He looked confused but didn't stop me. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt eternal. Emma chose that moment to wake up and immediately began fussing, probably sensing my anxiety. I bounced gently, whispering reassurances to both of us. The elevator doors opened to reveal the familiar Meridian Financial reception area. Jessica, the receptionist, looked up from her computer and froze. "Rebecca? Oh my goodness, is this your baby? She's gorgeous!" Jessica came around her desk, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But what are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming back for another few weeks." "Change of plans," I said, adjusting Emma's position. "Is Harrison in yet?" Jessica glanced toward the executive offices, her expression shifting to concern. "He is, but Rebecca, there's something you should know. Marcus Thompson has been using your office. He's in there right now." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "Well, then I guess it's time for us to meet." The walk through the office felt like a parade. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as colleagues noticed me and Emma. Sarah Martinez appeared at my side almost immediately. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" she whispered urgently. "With the baby?" "I'm coming back to work," I said simply. "But the meeting with HR, they said you were taking the part-time position." "I never agreed to that." Sarah's eyes widened. "Rebecca, this is career suicide. Harrison is going to lose his mind." "Maybe. But I'm not going quietly." We had reached my old office. Or rather, what used to be my office. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus Thompson sitting at my desk, talking on the phone. My personal items had been cleared out, replaced by his coffee mug, his family photos, his diplomas. Mia. I knocked on the glass door. Marcus looked up, and his expression shifted from confusion to alarm when he saw me with Emma. He quickly ended his phone call and opened the door. "Rebecca Chen, I presume?" he said, extending his hand. "Marcus Thompson. I've heard a lot about your work here." "All good things, I hope," I replied, not taking his hand, since both of mine were occupied with keeping Emma comfortable. "I'm actually here to reclaim my office." Marcus's friendly demeanor faltered. "I'm sorry, there must be some confusion. I was transferred here to fill the senior analyst position. Harrison told me the previous occupant had resigned." "The previous occupant is standing right in front of you, and she never resigned." Emma chose that moment to let out a loud cry, drawing attention from everyone nearby. I began the familiar bouncing motion that usually calmed her, but she was having none of it. Her cries echoed through the open office space. "Maybe we should take this conversation elsewhere," Marcus suggested, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle we were creating. "This is exactly where this conversation needs to happen," I said, raising my voice slightly to be heard over Emma's protests. "In the office that legally belongs to me." That's when Harrison appeared, moving through the office like a storm front. His face was red, and I could practically see steam coming from his ears. "Rebecca, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, stopping just outside the office doorway. "I'm reporting for work," I said, trying to calm Emma by gently patting her back. "As scheduled?" "With a baby?" His voice was loud enough that half the floor could hear him now. "With my daughter, yes. Since you've made it impossible for me to arrange childcare by jerking me around about my employment status, you cannot bring a baby to a professional workplace," Harrison said, his voice dripping with indignation. "This is completely inappropriate." "What's inappropriate is illegally denying my maternity leave and replacing me while I was gone," I shot back. Emma's cries were getting louder, and I could feel sweat beading on my forehead. "What's inappropriate is trying to force me out because I had a child." By now, we had attracted a crowd. Employees from across the floor had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. I recognized faces from accounting, from client services, from the executive assistant pool. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed shocked, and a few appeared to be enjoying the drama. Harrison lowered his voice but kept his tone threatening. "Rebecca, if you don't leave this office immediately, I'm calling security." "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady despite Emma's continued crying. "Call security on a woman and her baby. I'm sure that will look great for the company." That's when Patricia Williams from HR materialized, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Rebecca, Harrison, let's please take this to a conference room where we can discuss this privately," she said, her voice strained. "There's nothing private about systematic discrimination," I replied. "But fine, let's talk." The conference room they led me to was the same one where they'd tried to force me to accept the part-time position. This time, though, I wasn't alone. Emma had finally stopped crying and was now looking around with wide, curious eyes. Harrison sat across from me, his jaw clenched. Patricia took her usual spot between us, looking like a referee at a boxing match. "Rebecca," Patricia began, "bringing a baby to the workplace violates multiple company policies regarding—" "Which policies?" I interrupted. "Show me where in the employee handbook it says that nursing mothers can't bring their children to work when their employer has illegally terminated them." "You weren't terminated," Harrison said. "You resigned. I have witnesses who will testify that I never resigned. I have documentation of every conversation we had. I have emails confirming my intention to return from maternity leave." I shifted Emma to my other arm, grateful that she was staying calm. "What you don't have is any documentation of my supposed resignation because it never happened." Patricia looked uncomfortable. "Rebecca, even if there was a miscommunication about your status, bringing a baby to work creates liability issues for the company. What if she gets hurt? What if she disrupts other employees' work?" The only disruption here is the one caused by your department head's illegal actions, I said. I'm happy to discuss childcare arrangements once my legal employment status is restored. This is ridiculous, Harrison exploded. I will not have my workplace turned into a daycare center because you can't accept that your priorities have changed. My priorities haven't changed, I said firmly. I'm still committed to excellence in my work. I'm still the same person who closed the Caldwell deal ahead of schedule and under budget. The only thing that's changed is that you've decided I'm no longer valuable because I reproduced. Emma made a small cooing sound, as if she were commenting on the conversation. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile down at her. This meeting is over, Harrison announced, standing up. Rebecca, you have until end of business today to remove yourself and your child from these premises, or I'm having you escorted out. On what grounds? I asked. Trespassing. Disruption of business operations. Violation of workplace safety policies. Take your pick. Patricia winced. Harrison, maybe we should consult with legal before. I don't need to consult with anyone, he snapped. This woman is not an employee of this company, and she has no right to be here. He stormed out of the conference room, leaving Patricia and me alone with Emma, who had started to fuss again. I could tell she was getting hungry. Rebecca, Patricia said quietly, I understand you feel wronged, but this approach isn't going to solve anything. It's only going to make things worse for you. Worse than what? I asked. Worse than being illegally fired for having a baby? Worse than having my career destroyed because I wanted to bond with my newborn daughter? Patricia sighed. If you leave now, quietly, I might be able to work something out, maybe a better severance package, or a neutral reference for future job applications. I don't want a severance package, I said. I want my job back. That's not going to happen. You have to know that. Emma's fussing turned into full-blown crying again. I knew she needed to nurse, but I wasn't about to give Harrison the satisfaction of seeing me retreat to hide in a bathroom. Patricia, my daughter needs to eat. Is there a private room I can use? She looked relieved at the change of subject. There's a small office at the end of the hall that's not being used. The empty office was barely more than a closet, with just a desk and chair, but it offered privacy. As Emma nursed, I tried to think through my options. I could leave now and try to find a lawyer to take my case. But that could take years. I could stay and face whatever consequences Harrison had in mind, but that might just result in me being arrested for trespassing. Or I could do something that would force this issue into the light where it belonged. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. David had given me the number for Amanda Rodriguez, a journalist at the Denver Post who specialized in workplace issues. At the time, I thought I'd never use it. Amanda answered on the second ring. Rodriguez. Hi, Amanda. My name is Rebecca Chen. My husband David is a public defender. I think you two have worked together on some cases. I have a story you might be interested in. What kind of story? I took a deep breath. Workplace discrimination. A major financial firm illegally denied my maternity leave, replaced me while I was gone, and is now trying to have me arrested for bringing my baby to work. There was a pause. Are you at the workplace now, with the baby? Yes. Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While I waited for Amanda, I called David. He was between cases and could talk briefly. How's it going? He asked. About as well as you'd expect. Harrison threatened to have me arrested, HR is trying to get me to leave quietly, and Emma has turned the office into a daycare center. Good for Emma. Any regrets? I looked down at my daughter, who had finished nursing and was now gazing at me with those clear blue eyes that always made my heart melt. None whatsoever. 25 minutes later, Amanda Rodriguez walked into the Meridian Financial offices with a photographer in tow. She was a small woman with short gray hair and the kind of determined expression that suggested she'd seen every form of workplace injustice imaginable. Jessica at the front desk tried to stop them. Excuse me, are you here for a meeting? We're here to interview Rebecca Chen, Amanda said simply. I'll need to check with. That won't be necessary, I said, emerging from the hallway with Emma in my arms. I invited them. The next few minutes were controlled chaos. Amanda quickly grasped the situation and began asking pointed questions, while her photographer discreetly captured images of me in the office with Emma. Employees gathered around, some offering support, others clearly uncomfortable with the media attention. Harrison reappeared with 2 security guards in tow, but he stopped short when he saw the press badges. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is what happens when you illegally discriminate against new mothers," Amanda replied calmly. "I'm Amanda Rodriguez from the Denver Post. I understand you've denied Ms. Chen her legal right to maternity leave?" Harrison's face went pale. "I have no comment. This is a private personnel matter." "Denying federally protected leave isn't private," Amanda said. "Forcing new mothers to choose between their careers and their children isn't private. Would you like to explain to our readers why Ms. Chen felt she had no choice but to bring her baby to work?" "Security, escort these people out immediately," Harrison ordered. "Actually," Amanda said, producing a press ID, "we have a right to be here as long as Ms. Chen invited us and she's an employee. Is Ms. Chen an employee, Mr. Webb?" Harrison found himself in an impossible position. If he said yes, then he had to acknowledge my right to be there. If he said no, then he had to explain why he'd fired me for taking maternity leave. "Ms. Chen's employment status is under review," he said finally. "Under review because she had a baby?" Amanda pressed. "I have no further comment." Harrison retreated to his office, probably to call the company's legal department. The security guards looked uncertain about what to do. The photographer continued taking pictures of Emma and me in the office environment, creating a stark visual contrast between corporate America and new motherhood. "Rebecca," Amanda said, "can you walk me through exactly what happened? From the beginning?" As I told my story, I could see employees listening in. Some nodded in recognition. Clearly, this wasn't the first time they'd seen or heard about pregnancy discrimination at Meridian Financial. Others looked shocked, as if they'd never considered how difficult it might be for working mothers in their industry. Emma remained remarkably calm throughout the interview, occasionally making small sounds that seemed to punctuate my points. At one point, she reached out and grabbed Amanda's pen, causing the reporter to smile. "She's quite the little activist," Amanda observed. "She gets it from her mother," I replied. The interview lasted about an hour, during which time Harrison made several more attempts to have us removed from the building. Each time, Amanda politely but firmly explained press rights and asked increasingly pointed questions about the company's treatment of pregnant employees. Finally, a man in an expensive suit who I didn't recognize appeared in the office. He had the look of someone who'd been pulled away from something important and wasn't happy about it. "Ms. Rodriguez?" he said, approaching Amanda. "I'm Robert Kellerman, General Counsel for Meridian Financial. I understand there's been some confusion here today." "No confusion at all," Amanda replied. "Just a clear case of pregnancy discrimination." "I'd like to invite you to discuss this matter in a more appropriate setting," Kellerman said smoothly. "Perhaps we could arrange a formal interview at a later date?" "This setting seems perfectly appropriate," Amanda said. "After all, this is where the discrimination is taking place." Kellerman's smile was strained. "Ms. Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about the facts of this situation." "Then by all means clarify them," Amanda said, pulling out her recorder again. And that's when I realized that bringing Emma to work hadn't just been about making a point. It had been about forcing a conversation that nobody wanted to have, in a place where it couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Robert Kellerman's arrival changed the entire atmosphere in the office. Within minutes, he had somehow managed to clear most of the gawking employees back to their desks, though I could feel their eyes on us from across the floor. Emma seemed to sense the shift in energy and began making small whimpering sounds that I recognized as her early warning system for a full meltdown. "Ms. Chen," Kellerman said, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd diffused corporate crises before. "I understand you have concerns about your employment status. I'd like to help resolve this situation amicably." Amanda Rodriguez wasn't buying the diplomatic approach. "Mr. Kellerman, are you acknowledging that Ms. Chen was illegally denied her maternity leave?" Kellerman's smile never wavered. "I'm acknowledging that there seems to be some confusion about the circumstances surrounding Ms. Chen's departure from the company." "I never departed," I interjected, bouncing Emma gently as her fussing increased. "I took federally protected leave to care for my newborn daughter. When I attempted to return, I discovered I'd been replaced. And now she's been forced to bring her infant to work because your company has created an impossible situation, Amanda added, her pen poised over her notepad. Kellerman glanced around the office, clearly aware that this conversation was being observed by dozens of employees. Perhaps we could continue this discussion in a more private setting? I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. The only solution that works for me is getting my job back, I said firmly. Emma's whimpering had escalated to actual crying now, and I could feel that familiar mix of maternal instinct and professional frustration that had become my constant companion. That's when Sarah Martinez approached our group, her expression determined, despite the obvious discomfort of inserting herself into such a volatile situation. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Kellerman directly. "I'm Sarah Martinez, senior analyst in this department. I think there's something you should know about Rebecca's situation." Kellerman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ms. Martinez, this really isn't the appropriate." "Rebecca isn't the first," Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining strength. 3 years ago, Jennifer Walsh in accounting was pushed out after her maternity leave. 2 years ago, it was Lisa Kim in client services. Last year, it was Maria Santos from our Phoenix office who got transferred here. Same pattern every time. Pregnancy, pressure, and then suddenly their positions are restructured, or they're encouraged to reassess their priorities. Amanda's pen was moving rapidly across her notepad now. "Mr. Kellerman, would you care to comment on this apparent pattern of discrimination?" Kellerman's composure cracked slightly. "I'm not prepared to discuss individual personnel matters involving other employees." "You don't need to discuss them," Sarah continued, her confidence building. "I have documentation, email chains, meeting notes, conversations I witnessed. Harrison has a system, and Rebecca is just the latest victim." Emma's crying had reached the level where I knew she needed more than just bouncing. She was probably hungry again, or needed a diaper change, or was simply overwhelmed by all the adult tension surrounding her. I looked around desperately for somewhere to tend to her needs. "There's a mother's room on the 15th floor, offered a voice from behind us. I turned to see Jennifer Walsh herself, the accountant Sarah had mentioned. She was a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and the slightly frazzled look of someone juggling multiple priorities. "Jennifer," I said, surprised. "I thought you left the company." "I did. I'm here for a client meeting with my new firm." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only our group could hear. "But when I heard through the office grapevine what was happening up here, I had to come see for myself." Kellerman was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Ms. Walsh, as a former employee, you have no business interfering in current company matters." "I have every right to be here as a client representative," Jennifer replied coolly. "And as someone who went through exactly what Rebecca is experiencing, I have a responsibility to speak up." Amanda turned to Jennifer with obvious interest. "Would you be willing to go on record about your experience?" "Absolutely." Emma's cries were now echoing through the office space, drawing more attention than I wanted. Several employees had stopped pretending to work and were openly watching our impromptu press conference. I could see Harrison in his office pacing back and forth while apparently having an animated phone conversation. "Mr. Kellerman," I said, raising my voice to be heard over Emma's protests, "I need to take care of my daughter. But I'm not leaving this building until we resolve my employment status. Miss Chen, surely you can see that this situation is disruptive to our business operations." "What's disruptive is forcing new mothers to choose between their careers and their children," I shot back. "What's disruptive is systematically driving out pregnant employees and thinking no one will notice." Marcus Thompson, who had been hovering awkwardly near the office that used to be mine, finally spoke up. "Look, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I was told the position was vacant when I took the transfer. If there's been some kind of mistake." "There's been no mistake," Kellerman said quickly. "You were properly hired for an open position." "Open because you illegally forced out the previous occupant," Amanda observed. By now, word of the confrontation had apparently spread beyond our floor. I could see people from other departments emerging from the elevator bank, curious about the commotion. Among them was Patricia Williams from HR, accompanied by two people I didn't recognize: a middle-aged man in a navy suit and a younger woman carrying a tablet. "Mr. Kellerman," Patricia said, approaching our group with obvious relief at his presence. "I've briefed Mr. Davidson on the situation." She gestured to the man in the navy suit. "This is James Davidson, our regional director." Davidson surveyed the scene: me holding a crying baby, Amanda with her recorder and notepad, the photographer discreetly capturing everything, the crowd of curious employees, and the obvious tension radiating from everyone involved. "This is quite a situation," he said finally. "Miss Chen, I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances." "Mr. Davidson," Amanda interjected before I could respond. "Amanda Rodriguez, Denver Post. Could you explain your company's policy regarding maternity leave?" Davidson's expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "Our company fully complies with all federal and state employment laws, including the Family and Medical Leave Act." "Then why is Miss Chen standing here with her baby instead of working at her desk?" Amanda pressed. "That's a complex situation that we're working to resolve." Emma's crying had reached fever pitch, and I knew I couldn't continue this conversation without addressing her needs. "I need 5 minutes to take care of my daughter," I announced. "But this discussion isn't over." Jennifer Walsh stepped forward. "I'll show you to the mother's room." As we walked toward the elevator, I could hear Amanda continuing to pepper Davidson and Kellerman with questions. The elevator ride down to the 15th floor gave me a moment to catch my breath and try to process everything that had happened. "How did you come here today?" I asked Jennifer as we walked down the corridor. "Sarah called me last night. She's been keeping track of what Harrison was doing to you, and she thought I should know." Jennifer stopped in front of a door marked Wellness Room. This used to be a storage closet until 3 women in accounting threatened to file complaints about inadequate lactation facilities. The wellness room was small but clean, with a comfortable chair, a small table, and a mini refrigerator. As I settled in to nurse Emma, Jennifer sat across from me. "Rebecca, I want you to know that what you're doing today takes incredible courage." When Harrison pushed me out, I just accepted it. I was tired, overwhelmed, and I thought fighting would be pointless. "What exactly happened?" I asked, grateful that Emma had finally calmed down. Same pattern Sarah described. During my pregnancy, Harrison started questioning my commitment, giving me less important projects, making comments about how I'd probably want to focus on being a mom after the baby came. When I returned from leave, my position had been restructured, and I was offered a part-time role with significantly reduced responsibilities. "Did you consider fighting it?" Jennifer sighed. "My husband was unemployed at the time, and we needed my insurance coverage. Harrison made it clear that if I caused trouble, even the part-time position might disappear. So I took what they offered, worked there for 6 more months while looking for something else, and eventually found a position with a company that actually values working mothers." "But you never reported what happened?" I was scared. Scared of retaliation, scared of being blacklisted in the industry, scared of legal costs I couldn't afford. She looked at me with something like admiration. "But you're not scared, are you?" I thought about that as Emma nursed contentedly. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm also angry. And I have a daughter now who's going to grow up in a world where this kind of discrimination is either acceptable or it isn't. I want her to see that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's scary." When Emma finished eating and I'd changed her diaper using supplies from the well-stocked diaper bag I'd optimistically packed that morning, we returned to the 23rd floor. The scene that greeted us was even more chaotic than what we'd left. Amanda Rodriguez was now interviewing Sarah Martinez while the photographer captured images of the office environment. Davidson and Kellerman were huddled in intense conversation near the conference room. Several more employees had gathered, including some I recognized from other departments who were apparently sharing their own stories with anyone who would listen. Most notably, there were now 3 additional people with press badges scattered around the office. Word had apparently gotten out, and other media outlets were arriving to cover the story. "Rebecca," Amanda called out when she saw me return, "Channel 7 and Colorado Public Radio are here. They'd like to speak with you as well." I felt a moment of panic. This was spiraling far beyond what I'd imagined when I made that first phone call to Amanda. But then I looked down at Emma, who was gazing around with wide, alert eyes, and I remembered why I was doing this. "Of course," I said. The next hour was a blur of interviews, questions, and photographs. I found myself telling my story over and over again, each time to a different reporter, each time feeling more confident in my decision to go public. Emma remained remarkably calm throughout most of it, almost as if she understood the importance of what was happening. During one interview with the Channel 7 reporter, Harrison finally emerged from his office. His face was flushed, and he looked like a man who'd been receiving very unpleasant phone calls. "This circus ends now," he announced, his voice carrying across the office. "Miss Chen, you have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and leave this building, or I'm calling the police." The reporter immediately turned her camera toward Harrison. "Mr. Webb, are you threatening to have a new mother arrested for exercising her legal rights?" "I'm protecting my employees from this disruption," Harrison replied, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "Mr. Webb," called out the Colorado Public Radio journalist, "can you explain why Miss Chen's position was filled while she was on federally protected leave?" "There is no federally protected leave in this case because Miss Chen resigned," Harrison said, but even he seemed to realize how weak that sounded. "Do you have documentation of her resignation?" Amanda asked. Harrison's jaw clenched. "Personnel matters are confidential." "Illegal discrimination isn't confidential," I said, stepping forward with Emma in my arms. "And I never resigned. I have witnesses, documentation, and a pattern of discriminatory behavior that goes back years." That's when Davidson stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Meridian Financial takes all employment concerns very seriously. We're committed to conducting a thorough review of this matter and ensuring that all our policies are properly followed." "What kind of review?" Amanda pressed. "And what happens to Ms. Chen's employment status in the meantime?" Davidson glanced at Kellerman, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Ms. Chen will be reinstated to her position effective immediately while we conduct our investigation." The words hung in the air for a moment. I felt my knees go weak with relief, but I forced myself to stay focused. "What about Marcus Thompson?" I asked. "What happens to him?" "Mr. Thompson will be reassigned to an equivalent position," Davidson said quickly. "There are several senior analyst openings in our other departments." Marcus himself looked relieved. "That works for me. I never wanted to be part of anyone getting pushed out." Harrison's face had gone from red to purple. "This is completely unacceptable. You're setting a precedent that any employee can bring their personal problems to work, and—" "Harrison," Davidson interrupted, his voice carrying unmistakable authority, "I think you should take the rest of the day off. We'll discuss your role in this situation tomorrow." The dismissal was public and humiliating, and Harrison knew it. He looked around the office, his gaze lingering on the reporters, the cameras, and finally on me and Emma. "This isn't over," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, it is," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "At least the part where you get to discriminate against working mothers without consequences." As Harrison gathered his things and left the office, I felt Emma shift in my arms. She had been so good throughout this entire ordeal, but I could tell she was getting tired. It had been a long day for both of us. Amanda approached me as the other reporters began wrapping up their interviews. "Rebecca, this story is going to have national reach. Are you prepared for that level of attention?" I looked around the office, at Sarah, who was beaming with pride, at Jennifer, who was talking animatedly with one of the other reporters, at Marcus, who was already on the phone, presumably discussing his reassignment, at the dozens of employees who were watching everything with expressions ranging from amazement to admiration. "I think so," I said. "If it helps other women avoid what I went through, then it's worth it." But even as I said the words, I knew that winning this battle was just the beginning. The real work of changing attitudes, policies, and corporate culture was still ahead of us. Emma made a small sound and snuggled closer against my chest, and I realized that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and an inbox full of emails from reporters, lawyers, and complete strangers who had seen the story on the news. Emma had slept through the night for the first time in weeks, as if she somehow understood that we'd weathered the storm and could finally rest. David was already up, sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop open and 3 different newspapers spread in front of him. The headline of the Denver Post read, "Financial Firm Accused of Systematic Pregnancy Discrimination." Below it was a photo of me holding Emma in the Meridian offices, with Harrison's angry face visible in the background. "You're famous," David said, looking up from his screen with a mixture of pride and concern. "The story's been picked up by CNN, NPR, and the Wall Street Journal. Your phone interview last night made it onto the Today Show." I poured myself coffee and sat down next to him, Emma still sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "Any word from Meridian?" "Patricia Williams called about an hour ago. She wants to schedule a meeting for this afternoon to discuss your transition back to work." David paused, studying my face. "Rebecca, are you sure you want to go back there, after everything that's happened?" It was a question I'd been asking myself since yesterday's confrontation ended. Going back to Meridian meant facing colleagues who had witnessed my very public battle, working in an environment where I'd be scrutinized for any sign of the divided loyalty that Harrison had accused me of, and dealing with the awkward aftermath of having essentially forced my way back into my job. "I need to go back," I said finally. "Not just for me, but for all the other women who are watching this situation. If I walk away now, it sends the message that even when you win, you still lose." David nodded slowly. "Then we make sure you don't go back alone." That afternoon, I returned to the Meridian building with David, Emma, and surprisingly my new lawyer, Catherine Morrison. Catherine was a specialist in employment discrimination who had called me that morning after seeing the news coverage. She'd offered to represent me pro bono, explaining that my case could set important precedents for working mothers across the country. The atmosphere in the Meridian offices was drastically different from the chaos of the previous day. Employees moved quietly through the halls. Conversations stopped when I passed, and I could feel the weight of their attention even when they weren't looking directly at me. It was the peculiar combination of celebrity and notoriety that comes with being at the center of a public controversy. Patricia Williams met us in the lobby with James Davidson and Robert Kellerman. Their demeanor was professionally courteous but noticeably tense. "Ms. Chen," Davidson said, extending his hand, "thank you for coming in today. I think we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone." "Mr. Davidson," Catherine interjected smoothly, "before we discuss any arrangements, I'd like to clarify my client's legal position. Ms. Chen is not here to negotiate her employment status. She's here to resume the position that was never legally terminated." The meeting that followed was unlike any workplace discussion I'd ever experienced. We sat in the executive conference room, the same one where I'd had my original pregnancy announcement with Harrison, while lawyers on both sides outlined terms, conditions, and expectations. Emma slept through most of it, occasionally stirring when voices were raised. "We're prepared to offer Ms. Chen a comprehensive settlement package," Kellerman began, sliding a thick document across the table. "Full back pay for the time she was improperly excluded from work, a promotion to senior marketing director with a 20% salary increase, and a confidential agreement regarding the circumstances of this situation." Catherine barely glanced at the document. "My client isn't interested in buying silence, Mr. Kellerman. She's interested in ensuring that what happened to her doesn't happen to other women." "What exactly are you proposing?" Davidson asked. "Full reinstatement with no conditions or probationary period. Implementation of comprehensive family-friendly policies, including on-site childcare facilities. Mandatory training for all management personnel on pregnancy discrimination. And the immediate termination of Harrison Webb." Davidson winced at the last point. "Mr. Webb has been with the company for 15 years. His termination would require significant justification." "You mean more justification than systematically violating federal employment law?" I spoke up for the first time since the meeting began. "More justification than the testimony from multiple women describing a pattern of discrimination?" "Rebecca," Patricia said carefully, "Harrison has agreed to attend sensitivity training and work with a management coach to address his communication style." "His communication style?" I repeated incredulously. "We're calling illegal discrimination a communication style now?" Catherine leaned forward. Mr. Davidson, let me be clear about something. This story isn't going away. CNN is planning a follow-up segment. The Wall Street Journal is investigating pregnancy discrimination in the financial services industry as a whole. You can either be part of the solution or continue to be part of the problem, but the spotlight isn't moving. The negotiations continued for nearly 2 hours. Emma woke up partway through and needed to be fed, which I did right there in the conference room while discussing policy changes. It was a surreal experience, nursing my daughter while debating the terms of my professional future, but it also felt like exactly the kind of statement that needed to be made. Finally, we reached an agreement. I would return to work immediately with full back pay and benefits. Meridian would implement new family support policies within 90 days. Harrison would be suspended pending a formal investigation, and if the investigation confirmed a pattern of discriminatory behavior, he would be terminated. Most importantly, the company would establish a fund to assist other employees who might have been affected by similar discrimination. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to sign the agreement. I want to work part-time for the first 6 months, 3 days a week. And I want to bring Emma with me when necessary. Kellerman started to object, but Davidson held up a hand. What would you need to make that work? A private office with space for a bassinet, access to the wellness room for nursing, and flexibility when she needs attention during meetings. That's highly irregular, Patricia said. So is denied maternity leave, I replied. Sometimes being irregular is what it takes to make progress. Davidson looked around the room, then nodded. We can make that work on a trial basis. 2 weeks later, I returned to work for my first official day back. The office had been transformed in small but significant ways. There were new signs directing people to the improved wellness room, which had been expanded and properly equipped. A notice had gone out about upcoming training sessions on inclusive workplace practices. And in what used to be a storage room near my office, contractors were installing soundproofing and child-safe features for what would become an emergency childcare space. My return to work wasn't without challenges. Some colleagues seemed unsure how to interact with me, as if my public battle had made me a different person. Others went out of their way to show support, sharing their own stories of workplace struggles and expressing gratitude that someone had finally stood up to the system. Marcus Thompson had indeed been reassigned to the corporate development department, where he seemed much happier working on merger analysis rather than marketing campaigns. He stopped by my office on my first day back. Rebecca, I wanted to apologize again for the awkwardness of this whole situation, he said. I really had no idea what had happened when I took the position. Marcus, you don't need to apologize. You were as much a victim of Harrison's manipulation as I was. Still, I'm glad things worked out, and for what it's worth, I think what you did took incredible courage. The most difficult adjustment was figuring out how to balance Emma's needs with my professional responsibilities. On days when I brought her to work, I had to learn to navigate conference calls while she played quietly in her portable playpen, and master the art of taking notes while bouncing a fussy baby. My colleagues were surprisingly accommodating, often offering to hold Emma during breaks or helping me carry her equipment between meetings. Sarah Martinez became an invaluable ally in those early weeks, often serving as an impromptu babysitter when I needed to step into lengthy meetings or handle urgent client issues. Other working mothers in the company began reaching out, sharing tips and creating an informal support network that hadn't existed before. 3 months after my return, Harrison Webb's suspension became a termination. The internal investigation had uncovered not just the pattern of pregnancy discrimination that we'd suspected, but also evidence of other forms of bias in his hiring and promotion decisions. His departure was announced quietly, with no fanfare, but the message was clear. Meridian Financial was serious about change. Emma thrived in her unconventional office environment. At 6 months old, she was a favorite among my colleagues, who delighted in her sunny disposition and her apparent fascination with financial documents. She had her own small area in my office with toys, a changing station, and a crib for naps. On busy days, the on-site childcare service that Meridian had contracted handled her care, but having the flexibility to keep her close when needed was invaluable. The story of my fight at Meridian continued to have ripple effects beyond our office. Catherine Morrison told me that she'd been contacted by dozens of women across the country who were facing similar discrimination. Several had cited my case in their own legal battles, and at least 3 major corporations had proactively updated their family leave policies after the publicity surrounding my situation. 6 months after that chaotic day when I first brought Emma to work, I was invited to speak at a conference on workplace equality in Chicago. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of HR professionals, lawyers, and corporate executives, I thought about how different my life had become. A year ago, I began, I thought I had to choose between being a good mother and being a successful professional. I thought that having a baby meant accepting less challenging work, lower pay, and diminished opportunities. I thought that was just the price women paid for having families. Emma was with David back home in Denver, but I could feel her presence in every word I spoke. What I learned is that those choices aren't inevitable. They're the result of systems and attitudes that we can change, if we're willing to fight for change. I talked about the importance of allies like Sarah Martinez and Jennifer Walsh, who were willing to speak up even when it was uncomfortable. I discussed the role of media attention in forcing accountability, and the power of documentation in building a legal case. But mostly, I talked about the fundamental principle that guided my decision to bring Emma to work that day. The belief that working mothers shouldn't have to hide their children or apologize for their families. After my speech, a young woman approached me during the reception. She was probably in her late 20s, with the slightly overwhelmed look of someone juggling multiple priorities. "Ms. Chen," she said, "I'm Lisa Park. I work for a tech company in Seattle, and I'm 5 months pregnant. My manager has already started making comments about how I'll probably want to focus on family after the baby comes." "What kind of comments?" I asked. "He's reassigned my biggest project to a male colleague to reduce my stress. He's suggested that I might want to consider part-time work when I come back. Yesterday, he asked if I was, quote, really committed to my career path." I felt that familiar anger rising in my chest. Despite all the progress we'd made, despite all the attention my story had received, women were still facing the same impossible choices. "Lisa," I said, "do you know what your company's policies are regarding pregnancy discrimination?" "I've looked them up, but policies in reality don't always match." "No, they don't. But that's exactly why you need to document everything. Every comment, every reassignment, every suggestion that you're less committed because you're pregnant. And if you need help navigating this, I know people who can assist you." I gave her Catherine Morrison's contact information and the details for several organizations that support working mothers facing discrimination. As she walked away, I realized that my fight at Meridian hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning. Emma is 9 months old now, and our routine has settled into something that works for our family. I work 3 days a week in the office and 2 days from home, which gives me the professional engagement I need, while still allowing me to be present for Emma's important milestones. David has been able to take on more challenging cases at the public defender's office, knowing that our financial situation is stable and that Emma is well cared for. The changes at Meridian have been more comprehensive than I ever imagined possible. The company now offers 6 weeks of paid parental leave in addition to FMLA protections, has established partnerships with several childcare providers to offer employees discounted services, and has implemented flexible scheduling options for all employees with caregiving responsibilities. Most importantly, they've created clear procedures for reporting and investigating discrimination, with protection for employees who speak up about unfair treatment. But the real measure of success isn't in policy changes or media attention. It's in the stories I continue to hear from other working mothers who feel empowered to advocate for themselves. It's in the young fathers at Meridian who now feel comfortable taking paternity leave without fear of career repercussions. It's in the gradual but noticeable shift in how pregnancy and parenthood are discussed in professional settings. Last week, a colleague announced her pregnancy during a department meeting, and the first response wasn't concern about project timelines or staffing changes. It was congratulations and questions about how the team could best support her during her transition to motherhood. That's the kind of change that can't be mandated by policy. It has to grow from a fundamental shift in how we think about work, family, and the false choice between professional success and personal fulfillment. Emma has started pulling herself up to standing, holding onto the edge of her playpen while I work at my desk. Yesterday, she looked up at me with those bright blue eyes and clapped her hands, as if she was celebrating her own accomplishments. At that moment, I realized that she's growing up in a world where bringing your baby to work isn't a desperate act of rebellion. It's just one of many options available to working parents who refuse to choose between their careers and their children. That's the legacy I wanted to create for her, and for all the daughters and sons who will enter the workforce in the years to come. A world where talent is valued regardless of family status, where flexibility is seen as a strength rather than a weakness, and where the measure of professional commitment isn't the willingness to sacrifice everything else that matters. The fight isn't over. It may never be completely over, but each victory, each policy change, each woman who refuses to accept discrimination as inevitable, moves us closer to the world our children deserve. And that's worth every uncomfortable moment, every difficult conversation, and every day when I had to choose between being professional and being human. Because in the end, I didn't have to choose at all. I gotta be both. 2 years have passed since that pivotal Tuesday morning when I walked into Meridian Financial with Emma strapped to my chest, and the world looks fundamentally different now. Not just for me, but for countless working families across the country. Emma is now a curious, energetic 2-year-old who treats the Meridian offices like her second home. She knows which elevator buttons to push, waves to the security guards by name, and has somehow convinced half the accounting department that she's their unofficial mascot. Last month, she took her first steps in the conference room during my quarterly presentation, causing a room full of serious financial executives to break into spontaneous applause. The transformation at Meridian has exceeded every expectation I had during those tense negotiations 2 years ago. What started as grudging policy changes to avoid further legal trouble has evolved into a genuine cultural shift that's attracted national attention. The company now proudly markets itself as a leader in family-friendly workplace practices, and their recruitment numbers have improved dramatically as young professionals specifically seek out employers who understand work-life integration. The on-site child care center that began as an emergency measure is now a state-of-the-art facility serving 30 families. The part-time professional track that I helped pioneer has been expanded into a comprehensive, flexible work program that includes remote options, job sharing, and customized schedules for employees with various life circumstances, not just parents, but also those caring for aging relatives, pursuing education, or managing health conditions. Last month, I was promoted to Director of Strategic Marketing, a role that didn't exist before my return but was created to recognize both my professional contributions and my unique perspective on workplace innovation. The irony isn't lost on me that the company that once tried to push me out for having a baby now showcases my success as proof of their commitment to supporting working mothers. Catherine Morrison, my lawyer, has become something of a celebrity in employment law circles. She's argued 3 cases before federal appeals courts using precedents established in my situation, and her pro bono practice has grown into a nonprofit organization specifically focused on pregnancy discrimination. Last year, she invited me to join the advisory board, where I help review cases and provide perspective from someone who's lived through the experience. The ripple effects of my story continue to surprise me. Just last week, I received an email from a woman in Portland whose company implemented new parental leave policies after their board saw a documentary that featured my case. A tech startup in Austin named their lactation room the Rebecca Chen Wellness Space. A business school in Chicago has developed a case study around my situation that's now taught in their management ethics course. But perhaps the most meaningful change has been in the conversations I have with other working mothers. The shame and secrecy that once surrounded pregnancy in professional settings has begun to dissolve, replaced by open discussions about accommodation, support, and realistic expectations. When Jennifer Walsh calls to tell me about a promotion she received at her new company, or when Sarah Martinez shares that she's pregnant with her second child and her manager's first response was to ask how the team could best support her, I'm reminded that individual courage can indeed create collective change. David's career has flourished alongside mine, benefiting from the flexibility that comes when both partners feel supported in their professional pursuits. He's now a senior public defender specializing in family law, and he often tells colleagues that watching me fight for workplace rights gave him a deeper understanding of the systemic barriers that many of his clients face. We've become that couple at dinner parties who inevitably end up in conversations about work-life balance, though we've learned to embrace our role as accidental advocates for progressive workplace policies. Emma's perspective on all of this is, of course, beautifully uncomplicated. To her, it's perfectly normal that mommy sometimes works from the office and sometimes from home, that babies occasionally attend business meetings, and that workplaces should accommodate the full spectrum of human experience. She's growing up with an unconscious assumption of equality and flexibility that I hope will make her generation's fight for workplace rights unnecessary. The financial industry as a whole has been slower to change than I might have hoped, but progress is measurable. A recent survey by the Women in Finance Association found that 67% of major firms have implemented enhanced parental leave policies in the past 2 years, and 43% now offer some form of on-site childcare or childcare assistance. Harrison Webb's name has become something of a cautionary tale in management training programs, a reminder of how quickly discriminatory behavior can become a public relations disaster in the age of social media. Speaking of Harrison, I ran into him 6 months ago at a coffee shop near downtown. It was awkward, as these encounters inevitably are, but he surprised me by approaching my table where I was working while Emma played quietly with her coloring books. "Rebecca," he said, his voice lacking the authoritative tone I remembered, "I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong, and I've spent the last 2 years trying to understand why I thought it was acceptable." I looked up at him, this man who had once held so much power over my professional life, and felt mostly sadness for the opportunities he'd missed to be a better leader, a better mentor, a better human being. "Harrison, I appreciate you saying that. It takes courage to acknowledge when we've been wrong. I've been working with a consultant, learning about unconscious bias, about the assumptions I made without even realizing it. I want you to know that your fight, what you did, changed my perspective on a lot of things." We talked for a few more minutes, and while I'll never forget the stress and anxiety he caused me, I found myself hoping that his growth was genuine, that maybe some good could come from even the most difficult experiences. The speaking engagements that began with that conference in Chicago have evolved into a significant part of my professional identity. I now give keynote addresses at corporate conferences, university symposiums, and policy forums, sharing not just my personal story but the broader lessons about institutional change, individual courage, and the business case for inclusive workplaces. Next month, I'm scheduled to testify before a Senate subcommittee on workplace equality, where I'll present recommendations for strengthening federal protections for working families. It's surreal to think that the same voice that once trembled while asking for basic maternity leave will soon be addressing federal lawmakers about policy reform. But the platform that means the most to me is the mentorship program I've established at Meridian, where I work with young professionals, both women and men, who are navigating early parenthood while building their careers. These conversations remind me that progress isn't just about policy changes or media attention. It's about creating space for the next generation to thrive, without having to choose between professional ambition and personal fulfillment. Emma often sits in on these mentoring sessions, playing with her toys while the adults discuss career strategies and workplace navigation. Yesterday, one of my mentees commented that seeing Emma in the office made her feel more confident about her own plans to start a family while pursuing partnership at her law firm. "It's not just that you brought your baby to work," she said. "It's that you made it normal for children to exist in professional spaces, for motherhood to be visible rather than hidden. That visibility, I've come to understand, is one of the most powerful tools for creating change. When pregnancy and parenthood are relegated to whispered conversations and carefully managed accommodations, they remain problems to be solved, rather than normal life experiences to be supported. When they're visible, discussed openly, and integrated into workplace culture, they become opportunities for innovation, empathy, and competitive advantage." As I write this, Emma is napping in her crib in my office while I prepare for a client presentation. In a few hours, I'll wake her up, pack her diaper bag, and we'll head home to meet David for dinner. Tomorrow, she'll stay home with our nanny while I attend a full day of meetings. Next week, she'll come with me to a conference in San Francisco where I'm speaking about the evolution of workplace culture. This flexibility, this integration of professional and personal life, this refusal to compartmentalize human experience, this is what I fought for that day 2 years ago. Not just for myself, but for every working parent who deserves to bring their whole self to their career without apology or compromise. The letter I received last month from a college student in Michigan captures why this fight continues to matter. She wrote, "Ms. Chen, I'm graduating next year with a degree in engineering, and I used to worry that having children would mean giving up my dreams of leading major infrastructure projects. After reading about your experience, I realize that the only choice I need to make is to work for companies that value both my professional skills and my personal goals. Thank you for showing me that I don't have to choose." That's the world Emma is inheriting. A world where professional success and family life aren't mutually exclusive, where flexibility is valued over FaceTime, where talent is recognized regardless of the packages it comes in. It's not a perfect world yet, but it's measurably better than the one I entered as a new mother 2 years ago. And every morning when Emma and I walk through those Meridian financial doors together, I'm reminded that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to accept that things have to be the way they've always been. Sometimes change begins with one person, one baby, and one moment of saying, "Not anymore." The fight for workplace equality will continue long after Emma grows up, but at least she'll enter that fight with different assumptions about what's possible, what's normal, and what's worth demanding from the places where we spend our professional lives. That's a legacy I'm proud to leave her. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.